Talking to Owen Kelly, who is a lecturer in online media at Arcada in Helsinki. Owen, today we're talking about virtual worlds. Where did the idea of virtual worlds originate from?
Arguably, in the current form, they originated in science fiction stories. William Gibson and Neil Stephenson. Neil Stephenson's novel Snow Crash was the one that was taken up by Philip Rosendale in 2001 when he launched Second Life with the company Linden Labs. They called what they had a metaverse, which is a deliberate steal or a deliberate homage to Neil Stephenson's Snow Crash.
What was the sort of ambition for the site?
Its original slogan was "Your World, Your Way." What they hoped for was that they believed that the web would become a 3D environment. They believed that they were in a position to lead this, and that they thought that Second Life would transform into a kind of HTML-like level of universality. Their aim was to produce a world that, in their view, wasn't a game. That meant that there was nothing to do there. There was no prescribed action. It's not like World of Warcraft arguably is a virtual world, but it's virtual world that comes with a set of pre-planned tasks. If you don't want to join guilds, fight dragons, etc., then there's no point being there. You can't go in there and fish, peacefully fish in the corner. Not very easily, I don't think. Second Life was designed so that you could do anything you wanted, and unfortunately, I think in the end, not enough people found anything they wanted to do. Certainly, it's still going, it's still profitable, it's still attracting new users, but I think it's certainly not the case that it's transformed the way we think about the internet.
So what do people actually do on Second Life?
People use it in several different ways. For some people, it's like an adult Lego. It has a built-in programming language, which is both quite simple, as programming languages go, and also it's very easy to produce entertaining and amusing effects. That is, if we sit down and learn JavaScript, we'll find, before we know what we're doing, we're building calendar applications, or we're doing something which, unless we're being paid to do it, or unless we're a particular kind of person, is not necessarily intrinsically interesting. If you go into Second Life and start learning Linden's scripting language, within a day or so you're making fireworks or rockets, or you've got a working gun, or you've got a
racing car
or a surfboard that works on the sea. Certainly my students find that kind of programming, where it produces visible and entertaining effects, more fun when you're learning underlying programming concepts than the kind of traditional, now we're going to do an accounting program.
And so when people are in Second Life, they are able to buy things.
Yes, you're asking what kind of things people do in there. One, as I said, some people go in there and use it like Lego. They make things. What do they do with the things they've made? Some of them give them away, some of them sell them. And then there's a second group of people who could fairly be described, I think, as using it like adult Barbie and Ken. That is, Second Life can be used quite satisfactorily as a kind of enhanced chat room. I go in there to meet people. So there are clubs in Second Life, and the clubs effectively have the same function as different chat rooms on the internet, with the important difference that when you're on a chat room, whether it's in Google or wherever, there's just a little tiny two-dimensional picture of you that represents you, whatever it is, and you can be vaguely amusing, it's a picture of your dog, or it's a cake, or whatever, ha. But in Second Life, I'm dressed from head to foot, and in fact, more than that, my actual body is also an element of clothing, an item of clothing. So I can go in as a lizard. I can go in as a lizard in a top hat with a cloak. Because of this, there's a sense of presence and a sense of dressing up in the clubs in Second Life, which perhaps resembles what you might remember from first year student days, when you arrived in the student union for the first dance, and you made certain you were consciously aware that you were going to present some sort of image, or whatever it was. Even if you didn't want to present one, people were going to look at you and say, well, that's how it is in Second Life. So this group of people are very happy to accept from the makers whatever it is being made. So there's a large market for fashion accessories, for hair, for skin. The default avatars in Second Life are pretty rudimentary. So you can buy skins which are very detailed, which have muscle tones built into them, and
Tan.
Oh yeah, tans definitely, but also wrinkles and all sorts of things. Skins are actually quite tricky to make, because you have to map a physical body onto 2 dimensions, because the skins are just flat JPEG images.
So people buy things like clothes and skins and
Yes.
stuff like that.
Yes, indeed.
And they can build buildings.
Yes, the main expenditure in Second Life is land. And of course land is metaphorical. In the sense, what you're doing is you're renting a certain amount of computer space from Linden Labs. And it comes in the form of land, which is measured in square meters. 80%, I think, of the economy in Second Life revolves around land, because you can't build except, well, you can build without land, but you have to take the buildings with you. Now, the way Second Life works, you have an inventory, which is like a rucksack, but you can put anything in there. So if I've got a life-size Zeppelin and a castle, I can shove them in my rucksack, so that's not a problem. But if you've got a life-size castle, you presumably want to put it somewhere and keep it there, because it's a bit of a drag taking it in and out of your rucksack. So as soon as you realise I want to put my castle down somewhere, you find yourself renting land from Linden Labs, or renting land from somebody else, because most of the people who, I think there are about estimates are that there are about 5,000 or 6,000 people who earn approximately a full-time living from Second Life. Most of them buy land and sell land.
So how do you acquire the virtual currency? You actually have to pay
You give.
dollars.
It works a little like PayPal. You give them your credit card number and you buy X amount of lindens.
Yeah, so there's an exchange rate for lindens.
Yes, there is, and you can.
And does that fluctuate?
No, it's about. I think it's still about 100 to the euro. I'm not sure.
Okay.
I actually looked recently.
But you can also, presumably, if
you can take them out as well.
Yes.
This is slightly convoluted, but you can take the currency out.
And I understand that the US tax authorities took an interest in this.
Well, yes, because if I can give Linden Labs X amount of euros or American dollars and then get Linden dollars back, and then later on I can take my Linden dollars and convert them into euros or pounds or American dollars, then it's arguable this isn't a virtual currency in any meaningful sense at all. It's more like the chips in casinos. And since there was virtual gambling on Second Life and people were making a lot of money running virtual gambling halls, that's where the American tax authorities took an interest, because gambling is not usually tolerated without being licensed. And because this wasn't licensed, because it was only with virtual money, then it worked for a time until the American tax authorities decided this might be simply a way of getting around licensing laws.
And what happened with Second Life and OpenSim?
Second Life by its very nature is a closed system. That is, when Linden Labs started it, they said, you, me, we can rent space in Second Life. So Second Life is one unified world, and it lives on Linden Labs server farm in the middle of America, wherever that is. When there was a point a few years ago when the media hype about Second Life was at its highest, that it looked as though a number of other groups, some of them very, very well financed, were going to build their own virtual worlds. There was a group of ex-Mozilla engineers who said they were going to learn from Linden Labs' experience, and they said Linden Labs had done it the wrong way round, which arguably, logically, they had. And this group of people said, we're going to start by building an infinitely scalable system that will work like HTML, and it will just take over the web, and the web will become 3D, and Second Life will become an interesting memory, one of those founding things that died when it actually got going. And so Linden Labs quite reasonably were scared. They're a small company and they don't have infinite resources, and when they realised this, and there were other large companies, IBM and people looking at this, they decided to open source. They open sourced their viewer, and then they were going to open source the server software, but they never actually did in the end. And they were doing this in order to, well, basically in order to attract a sufficient number of programmers, they hoped, to make it possible for them to keep up with these other people. In the end, the other people, none of the other stuff worked. It all fizzled out. As it turned out, some of these well-funded groups found it was harder to do what Linden Labs had done than they'd imagined. Others of them found a way of working which classically never got to the end. Just the middle expanded, the middle of the process expanded, and then they ran out of money. So Linden Labs open sourced their viewer software and then gave help to people with the server software. They then backed off from the help, but for a time they did. Thus, an open source clone of Second Life was built, and that became OpenSim. But it has one important difference. As I said, when you go to Second Life, you are buying into this unified world which lives on a server farm somewhere, and you can't take stuff out of it. Linden Labs won't allow you to take the house, the castle you've built. It has to stay in Second Life.
You can't offline it or take it into another world.
No, in fact, that somebody made some tools to do that, and Linden Labs stamped on it very, very quickly. OpenSim works like WordPress. You can download the software and you can run the server software for a world on any computer you want. In fact, at Arcada, we've been experimenting with so-called Sims on a stick. We have pocket worlds which run completely on a 4 gigabyte USB stick. And so we're going to give those out in a project we're doing shortly to school children who will each have their own virtual world. And interestingly, this is irrelevant, this is a digression, but the children find the USB stick, the actual holdable nature of it, the tangible nature of it, as an attraction. Like, I've got a virtual world. So anyway, the OpenSim runs on any server, and this means it's possible. I've got them on USB sticks, but sometimes educational institutions can run their own world inside their firewall, with no chance of anybody else ever even knowing about it, let alone getting into it.
And there've been various discussions about putting virtual worlds together. That presumably is a sort of almost impossible Tower of Babel task. No,
because there's a professor in University of UCLA who has created a program which so-called hypergrids. In other words, there is a formal map on which you can place your world. And if it has a map reference, then in theory, I can link my world to your world.
But this is a theoretical exercise at the moment.
No, it works.
Yes. Okay.
It certainly works.